folks who've been unable. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Tom Fontana from the Ohio Soybean Council to introduce the webinar.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the opportunity to say hello to everyone today. Thank you for participating in this GrowNextGen webinar, to talk about artificial intelligence and agriculture technology and all the things associated with it. Appreciate Jane leading this webinar. Our special guest today is Dr. Scott Shearer from The Ohio State University. He's chairman of the Department of Food, Agricultural, and Biological Engineering. At the Soybean Council, we've done a number of projects with Dr. Shearer. I really appreciate collaborating with him and thank him for presenting to you today. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jane and thank Jane and Scott for their participation today.
Thanks so much, Tom. I really appreciate teachers taking their time out as well. I know you've had probably a busy day and you're running up into that holiday preparation and trying to get all the things in that you need to get in. So thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to just start off first before Dr. Shearer shares with us some of the future technology. I kind of wanted to just introduce a little bit of the storyline of the impact of technology on agriculture that we've had up till now. So I do have a few slides that I would like to share just to kind of do a little bit of a housekeeping and overview. First off, I'm going to try and limit this to about 5 minutes. It says 10, but I don't think it'll take me that long. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shearer so he can give us his take on the future. And I think one of the things that we don't really think about is the computer science and technology in agriculture. So I'm so glad you're all with us today. So to start off with, again, I just am trying to set up a little storyline here. There are some things that technology has impacted, and one of those things is the use of automation. Originally we were using oxen and horses to pull plows and implements, and now we have several different versions on the screen here of things that we have modernized, obviously, through the years, but we went from steam engines to diesel engines, and now we're using biodiesel, and some tractors even run on ethanol. So we're using some of those same products that we're creating out of our commodities or our products. Obviously, as they've gotten larger, it's allowed for larger amounts of ground to be cultivated more efficiently, and that's been a real obviously, that's technology all across the board has allowed us to be more efficient. This is an interesting set of implements, the moldboard plow, which is sometimes still used today, but to the chisel plow, and then to potentially no-till no-till tillage. So we've moved because of research and technology that we've been able to discover more about soil and soil compaction and what are the impacts of those things. And I'm sure that Dr. Shearer will talk a little bit more about that, but engineering has allowed us to be more efficient and not disturb as much ground as we've been getting ready, fields ready for cultivation. So this last slide that I have to share is really more about some of the spraying, maybe for pesticides or fertilizers. And we used to fly over fields and do the whole field, regardless of whether the whole field needed it or not. And now what we're able to do is control each one of those spray nozzles on the boom. They can be controlled by an onboard computer, or they can be programmed based on the field itself and what plants are growing there and what weeds are there that need to be sprayed, or where we know we have a problem. So it really has cut down on the use of, or the amount of pesticides and herbicides we've had to use. So again, a lot of that is done through computer programming, but also We've had advances in auto steer, advances in hydraulics, sensors, data collection methods. And so I'm going to turn it over to someone who knows a lot more about that than I do. And it is Dr. Scott Shearer. He received his PhD in agricultural engineering from Ohio State University in 1986. He currently serves as a professor and chair of food, agriculture, and biological engineering at OSU. Highlights of his research career include development of methodologies and controls for metering, and spatial applying of crop production inputs, kind of talking about those sprays, modeling of agricultural field machinery systems, autonomous multi-vehicle field production systems, and strategies for deployment of UAVs in agriculture. He has led research supported by over $15 million in grants, authored more than 200 technical publications, and has made numerous invited presentations at international conferences, professional meetings, and farmer forums. Dr. Shearer is a fellow of the American Society of Agriculture and Biological Engineers, and we are honored to have him as a speaker today. So we really appreciate you being here, Dr. Shearer. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. All right. We'll go ahead and share my screen here and get things organized. So I assume that you can see the title slide. Good. All right. So as I go along, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to type them in, save them for the end, whatever the case may be. As Jane said, I'm going to be talking to you about the state of technology. We can think about it futuristically, but a lot of what I'm also talking about today, products in the marketplace, things that farmers are beginning to purchase and deploy on their farms. And so it'll be kind of an interesting trip. It is not my intent to make you experts in artificial intelligence, but I also want to supply enough of the context so you can appreciate how artificial intelligence is going to change agriculture. So with that, I'll go ahead and I think get started here. I talk to farmers a lot, and I like this graphic that I put together. This is about a child learning to pour milk. And so when we talk about artificial intelligence, what we're really trying to do is, I'm going to say, recreate the learning model, if you will, that exists in the human brain. And we do that in a digital representation with inside of a computer. But the young man on the left-hand side is learning to pour milk, and we would characterize his efficiency as not being very good. The next young lady is doing a great job. She has the carton over the cup in this case, but she hasn't quite learned to tip it back up at the right time and stop the milk from pouring. We get to the young lady in the orange t-shirt, and obviously she has mastered it. And then we go all the way to the right, and this young lady has mastered pouring from a different style or type of carton. The point being in all of this, and most of you being in education appreciate this more so than I do, but humans learn by making mistakes and then correcting based on those mistakes in the future. This is not a lot different from what's going to happen in terms of the deployment of artificial intelligence in agriculture. Central Ohio is becoming the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. We got Intel coming in to Central Ohio with their chip plant. But the other thing, and this has kind of been a quiet evolution in some respects, although it's made the news more lately, but Google, Facebook, and Amazon are all building cloud storage locations in Central Ohio, and there's some good justifications for that in terms of proximity to the end users. When we begin to think about access to electricity, these things are, these data warehouses are, they're run on electricity. I can't describe it any other way. They generate a lot of heat, and then they have to cool them. And so energy costs are very central to the use of those data warehouses. The other thing that's kind of interesting, there are some projections by some of the database companies that up to 30% of the data stored in these data warehouses could come from agriculture in the future. I want you to think holistically, too, about agriculture. and the connection to human health. And so it's going to be from seed to table, to the influence or the effect on human health. What's more important, though, is who's leading the effort in AI. And there's the three big companies on the left, and I don't think anybody else agree with that. But the other thing is there are literally hundreds of companies in the US in a bunch of different domains figuring out how to deploy AI to benefit humans. And, I'm going to say last year was kind of a watershed event with ChatGPT. And I think most of you can appreciate, maybe some of you have heartburn with it. At Ohio State, I was teaching a course, Introduction to Digital Agriculture, and my attitude was, I'm just going to let the students use it to write their term paper. Genie's out of the bottle. We're not going back. I will tell everybody it's the first time I've graded term papers that I've been able to focus on content and not worry about the English. So there are some benefits. Obviously, learning, I'm going to leave it up to the experts in terms of education, but I think there's good things that are going to come along with it. What is driving AI deployment? In this case, what's driving AI deployment in agriculture? And one of the companies is NVIDIA. To make a long story short, NVIDIA has created a GPU, graphical processing unit, that is the size of a Raspberry Pi, and that's what's driving some of what's going on in agriculture today. That originally retailed for about $99. So we'll kind of see where that goes, but I'm going to show you some products coming up. Talk a little bit about neural networks. We got an input layer on the left-hand side, which is data coming in. We have hidden layers, and then we have an output layer, which is classification of whatever the input is. And so this could be images coming in the left-hand side in the input layer. The output layer could be classification of images, could be cars, trucks, buses, cats, dogs, things of that nature. We can also put in time-varying signals on the left-hand side. And I'll give you some examples of this coming up. And then we can identify things that are associated with time-varying signals. One of the things I'll talk about in just a little bit is sounds of nature. And so I'll come back to that. As technology has gone along, if you will, and our processing capabilities have substantially expanded, what we have now is we have these hidden layers, and we have these deep learning neural networks. And it is really the connections, and think of the hidden layers, the golden rod nodes, if you will, as all having weightings to them, and then the lines represent the connectivity. But as you move along in those hidden layers, that's really where the training occurs within the neural networks, as well as the ability or the power for classification. So I'm not going to get too deep into this in some respects, but I just wanted people to understand some of what's going on in terms of numerical representations. When we look at training neural networks, there are a couple different types of training that are supervised. And what we would do is we would label images up front and then use that to train the neural networks. And here we have cats and dogs. And if the neural network is trained properly, we could submit images in the future, and then those would be labeled by the neural network classifiers, either a cat or a dog, depending on various features. Okay, and so we term this supervised learning. There's a lot of human interaction in supervised learning. Unsupervised learning, on the other hand, is when we allow the neural network classifier to sort things out. And so in either case, there is a lot of practical applications of these neural networks that have been trained in these manners. We can also have semi-supervised training, and that's yet another where there is partial human input to the process, but it helps essentially establish the categories that things will be sorted into. So we'll get down to some practical applications and see where some of this is applied in agriculture. I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and research and some of what's going on, and hopefully you can begin to get an appreciation. Wheat maturity in agriculture. One of the things, whenever we have intensively managed wheat crops, one of the critical things is knowing what the head count is. In other words, how many weed heads are in that field. And so in this case, what we're using is artificial intelligence to identify objects within the image, in this case, weed heads, and then we can begin to count the number of weed heads. It has to do with stage of development, but it also has to do with a lot of management of inputs. Farmers in intensive wheat management, their focus is on managing for about 1,000 weed heads per square meter. If you get beyond that, yield goes down. If you have less than that, yield goes down. And so this becomes a tool that producers might use. Insect detection. In this case, we have an image, and that image is obviously being broken up into regions, but then within those regions, we're beginning to identify and count honeybees. One possible use, here's one that's probably a little bit closer to being able to identify with livestock health monitoring. In this case, we have images from above. There would be an aisleway where cows might be walking to be milked, but we might be using this for livestock health monitoring. We might look at the gait of the animal, how the animal moves. We can look at the overall physical size of the animal, and we can begin assessing whether there's been weight gain, weight loss, a number of things associated with health monitoring. Here's one where we're monitoring baby chicks. And here you can actually, by tracking the baby chick, identify what those chicks are doing. We have right-hand side, chicks eating. We have chicks resting in the middle of the image. Left-hand side, we have chicks drinking. And so again, animal activity becomes pretty important in terms of assessing the welfare of the animals during grow-out phases and a number of other activities. Here's one that I think maybe everyone can probably identify with. This is they call it's a song meter, but it's a device that can be located in an urban area, maybe in a bioswale, some kind of green infrastructure. It could be in an urban garden. But what this does is record sound over time. And then what you're able to do is go back and analyze those recordings and essentially identify the number of type of birds that are located within that urban habitat. And it's doing this by looking at the sound, the time varying nature of the sound recording, and it's able to pull out through artificial intelligence which birds are making essentially which noises and which ones are present in the setting. This can be done for insect detection as well. So again, it's another way of looking at how artificial intelligence might be used to assess different entities or domains. Talk a little bit about transfer learning here. I've mentioned those companies before, the big ones, and there's lots of other ones too, but there's a facility called ImageNet, and this is a series of classified images. It's a database, and it is a database that a lot of people are using to train convolutional neural networks. And I'll come back and talk about the convolutional neural networks a little bit too. But the computer scientists kind of see this as a challenge in terms of creating different architectures for their neural network classifiers and then coming up with different ways for training those classifiers. And everybody uses the standard data set so they can kind of compare, if you will, the accuracy of those convolutional neural nets that are being created, okay? The unique thing is you can then take those convolutional neural nets that's kind of an open architecture type thing, but you can download those, strip out the output nodes, and then retrain those to applications. And so that's effectively one of the things we've been doing at Ohio State here recently. The transfer learning, there is a way of taking the pre-trained classifier, and everybody talks about softmax, and there's a lot of things going on. But essentially, the output nodes are what we're kind of cutting out, if you will, and then we're retraining that classifier to a new data set. And it could be, in our case, we're looking at maybe nutrient stresses in soybean plants, okay? So there's variegation in the leaf margins, and things like that may occur if there's a potassium, a phosphorus, or a phosphorus deficiency in a soybean plant. And so we can use this transfer learning. We've we've used a lot of different classifiers. We found some that work very well in agriculture and some that don't work so well in agriculture. So here's a convolutional neural network kind of diagrammatically depicted. You have the image on the left-hand side. In the convolutional layers, you're extracting different features from the image. Could have something to do with pixel color. It could have something to do with the sharpness of edges in the image. There could be a whole host of features, but generally you may have as many as 10,000 features being extracted. We get into the classification layers, and this is where those image features are being connected and weighted, and then the very right side in the softmax layer is where we have the classification occurring. So if we have perhaps an image that has a car in it, then we would get classification of car coming out on the right-hand side. So a lot of what's being affected in this transfer learning is we're just looking at those classification layers and retraining to those. We've been able to do this on kind of a high-end personal computer. Some of our original retraining was taking 4 to 5 days. And then once we've kind of gotten acclimated to the environment in terms of maybe crop production, corn plants, we see the retraining times dropping to a few hours. But the nice thing is then we can put this into that graphical processing unit, take it to the field, and then begin doing image classification that's rate of about 5 to 15 images per second. I want to remind you it's a very doable thing and that it's about a $100 item. These are some of the images that we've been using for training our classifier. Left-hand side, we have a nitrogen deficiency. You'll notice the midrib of the leaf is yellow, okay? If we were just using a reflectance-based sensor, we might confuse a potassium deficiency with a nitrogen deficiency because we have yellow in either leaf. If you look in the center image, lower leaf, what you notice is the margins of the leaf have turned yellow. And so again, the nice thing about convolutional neural networks and these classifiers is we begin looking at the location of yellow within the leaves. 2 other leaves or situations I'm going to point out here. We have northern corn leaf blight up above. You'll notice there are lesions on the leaf. They're kind of cigar shaped. The right-hand side, we have gray leaf spot, and you'll notice the size and shape and distributions of the lesions of gray leaf spot are substantially different from those for northern corn leaf blight. This is where the neural network classifier does an excellent job of differentiating. We go into a field, we may want to apply either nitrogen to the crop or potassium in terms of a deficiency. In terms of northern corn leaf blight or gray leaf spot, we would be applying fungicides, and some fungicides may work better or be more effective on one crop disease in comparison to another. The leaf in the center is corn borer damage, and what's characteristic of corn borer damage, obviously, is insect feeding damage on the leaves or holes in the leaves. And so with the neural network classifier, we're able to go into a field using a camera and very rapidly process and figure out what sort of crop stress we have. Soybeans, since this is being sponsored by Ohio Soybean Council, we have sudden death syndrome, which is a problem in soybean production in many regions of the state of Ohio. We have dicamba damage, which is an herbicide damage. Some soybean varieties have dicamba resistance that allows you to spray dicamba over the crop, kill the weeds, and the soybean plant continues to grow. When farmers get confused about whether or not they have dicamba-resistant soybeans or not, or there could be drift damage, and then we see some of the cupping of the leaves up above. We see a healthy leaf in the center down below, and then we see frog eye leaf spot on the leaf to the right. Again, when we're going into a field and we're doing some sort of treatment, such as a fungicide for frog eye leaf spot, we really only want to spray the regions of the field where we see a threshold, an economic threshold of the prevalence of the frog eye leaf spot to justify use of the pesticide. Just as we really only want to spray the weeds in the field if we detect weed competition. This is a confusion matrix, but this is one of the ways we look at how effective the neural network classifier is. And so we take the images that are maybe unknown we run them through the classifier, and then we get the classifications, and we compare those against what a subject matter expert might do. And you can see we've done a pretty good job here, because bacterial leaf blight here as an input gets classified. 48 images were essentially classified, 90.6% classification accuracy is bacterial blight. And so that's a very good thing. You will notice, however, that we have bacterial blight here on the y-axis. There were 45 images misclassified as frog eye leaf spot, okay? And so this begins to tell us why our classifier is broken down. Most of the rest of these images, though, are classified extremely well with a very high classification accuracy. And so this table really gives you an idea or some insights into convolutional neural networks and their effectiveness. A lot of people will say that AI is a black box, and you put something in, you get something out, and that's correct. And one of the things that we're beginning to look at within universities is something called explainable AI. In other words, farmers might have confidence in it, but when you're able to explain why the classifier is doing what it is, it builds a lot of confidence with farmers and allows them to have a lot more confidence in using the technology. Anybody familiar with recaptcha? Okay. And everybody thinks, what, you're demonstrating you're not a robot? Have you noticed the subject matter oftentimes? Select all the images that have crosswalks, and so you go through and click on the images. At other times, it's what? Select all the images with stoplights or traffic lights, or select all the images with bicycles, or select all the images with cars, or select all the images with buses. Do you see a central theme? You know what you're doing for Google? You're classifying images for Google, okay? Initially, that first time through, you're probably proving that you're not a robot, but when you get a second set of 9 images, you're probably working for Google, okay? And what you're essentially doing is helping develop the intelligence for Google Car, okay? I want to be very cautious here, because I always talk about, well, these computer scientists are very talented people, and I don't want to take anything away from them. They may not necessarily be subject matter experts, okay? Here at Ohio State, one of the things I always say is, when I look at our computer scientists, I said, disastrous results occur in agriculture when the computer scientist doesn't know the difference between a barrow and a gilt, okay? And I get blank stares when I say that in front of a bunch of computer scientists. When I say that in front of a bunch of animal scientists, though, they all laugh, okay? And the point being is, the intelligence is going to be no better than the data that was, and the classified data that was used to train the classifiers. A friend of mine sent me this picture, and it said, select all the squares with tractors, okay? If you're from agriculture, you look at that image and you realize pretty quickly, those are not tractors, those are agricultural combines or machines for harvesting grain. Nobody in agriculture would pick any of the squares as having a tractor in them, okay? And so what I go back to is, it's very important moving forward that we have subject matter experts helping develop the intelligence and not leaving it up necessarily to the computer scientist. AI products in agriculture. You might like this video. This is a John Deere 8R tractor, which is fully autonomous. And you see it making an end of row turn. There were 75 of these tractors out this year in agriculture. They tilled about 45,000 acres of cropland across the US. This is not in full release, okay? In other words, farmers are not able to buy it, but John Deere has placed a lot of these tractors in service throughout the country, and they continue to learn. Now, when you look at that tractor and begin thinking about what it takes for that tractor to go from a tractor that is operated by a human to a tractor that's operated by technology, There is one thing that was added to the tractor, and if you look right here, these are stereo vision cameras in the center of the top of the cab. Okay, John Deere trained this stereo vision system with 40 million images. What were they training it for? They were training it to observe problems in the field that would be necessary for the tractor to stop. Collision avoidance. Could be another tractor. It could be a human in the field. Well, here's one set of stereo cameras. Over here on the left side of the tractor is another set of stereo cameras. Over here on the other side of the tractor, another set of stereo cameras. And I guess if 3 sets of stereo cameras are good, then another 3 sets of stereo cameras on the weight bracket here would be even better. So what transitioned this tractor, which by the way was using GNS guided auto steer, it was using a lot of other automation technologies to sense different factors about engine load and a number of things like that. But what really made this an autonomous tractor was the addition of these AI-driven stereo vision systems for collision avoidance. So I was at Agritechnica, and there was a gentleman that came out and got to talking about risk management with automated tractors. And really interesting guy to listen to, but he said, this collision avoidance system, if you're worried about the tractor running into a human being, how accurate would the system have to be? And somebody from the audience shouted out 99.9%. In other words, you'd have to have a confidence level in terms of its ability to classify and discriminate humans in the surroundings so that it would stop the tractor and not run over them. And so the guy came back and said, so let me see, you said 99.9% accuracy would be sufficient. So if I had a farm where I had 1,000 laborers and I had an autonomous tractor, it would be acceptable for you, okay, for the tractor to run over 1 human every month. Okay, and this kind of brought it home to the people in the audience. And so when we begin thinking about the technologies, we have to begin thinking about what the acceptable risk levels are. Okay. By the way, when we look at agriculture, the scenes are much more complex than they are for automated cars. Automated cars are usually in very well-known settings. It's on a public highway. There's stripes. There's all kinds of traffic signals and devices. But these things are well known, and they're environments that are very easy to interpret and understand from a safety point of view. When we look at agriculture, though, it is a much more complex situation. This was out at the Molly Cairn Agricultural Center. We did this back in August. This is I'm going to say utility tractor used in agriculture. It's nothing special. This has a Sabanto automation package dropped on. And this is available to farmers today. This company, Sabanto, has begun selling the automation package. The tractor itself sells for about $70,000. The automation package you drop on the tractor is $90,000. Okay. We would have a lot of fun with the people that we were demonstrating this to. We'd get them to stand at the end of the field. And I said, you know, as that tractor gets to the end of the field, as it's coming up to us and you hear the engine throttle down, that's very reassuring because the tractor's being prepared to turn. And so I get everybody out there at the end of the field, and then I jump out of the way and say, I don't know about you, I'm getting out of the way just in case the tractor doesn't stop. But again, our acceptance as humans of this type of equipment is very interesting. We build confidence every time we use it that this machine is going to perform in the way it's intended. Okay. My concern is when we start deploying these autonomous tractors in agriculture, are we going to have to post fields? Do we have to warn people that there are robotic tractors? You know, what are the safety requirements going to be for agriculture as we move forward? My son sent me a video. He and his wife were in a cab in San Francisco. It was fully autonomous. The cab is driving through the city streets and comes upon a crosswalk. And as it approaches the crosswalk, somebody steps off the curb into the crosswalk. And the thing that I thought was very unique about that video is my son and his wife absolutely said nothing during that whole interaction between that vehicle and the person in the crosswalk. Dead silence. The car stopped, the person walked in front of the car in the crosswalk, and then the car proceeded on. But again, it's our acceptance of automations as humans as we move forward in terms of what's going to happen with some of this. We'll get back to AI a little bit. This is a product that John Deere has released. Farmers can buy this today. It is AI-driven spray application. In this case, you look across the spray boom, and there are regularly spaced nozzles about every 20 inches on that spray boom. You'll notice only a few of the nozzles are on. So this sprayer going 15 miles an hour, the camera will collect images. The images will be processed using the convolutional neural network that we talked about. And then if it detects a weed within the soybean crop, it turns on the specific spray nozzle to spray the weed and then shuts that nozzle off as it gets past the weed. What we're seeing with this technology is a 70 to 80, 90% reduction in the use of herbicide. When we think about environmental considerations in agriculture, that is a bit of a game changer. Okay, so we're going to move quickly towards this era when we're using crop production inputs that we only use them when they're warranted, and we only use them in limited quantities sufficient to control whatever the problem is. In this case, noxious weeds. Just this was a recent testimony to Congress on artificial intelligence, but the context of this was connectivity in rural America. And what I'm really talking about is broadband internet access. I think this is an interesting statement. This was by Jamie Hinman from John Deere. He is the Chief Technology Officer and one of the Senior Vice Presidents. He said our self-propelled sprayers, for example, feature 9 graphical processing units and 36 cameras. These cameras can scan a distance of 120 feet of a speed at 12 miles per hour through AI. They analyze images to identify weed pixels, allowing precise herbicide application only where necessary. The see and spray technology is not some futuristic vision. It is already in the field. In 2023, U.S. farmers achieved an impressive 61% reduction in contact herbicide across 275,000 acres of corn, soybeans, and cotton, saving approximately 2 million gallons of herbicide. Okay. Jamie Hinman was testifying in front of the Senate committee on access to rural broadband internet access and the ability to connect these machines. One of his concerns was being able to manage the data streams coming off of these machines for generating the intelligence necessary to be sent back to the machines. And so as we look to the future, broadband connectivity in rural Ohio is going to be key to the deployment of these technologies. Another company that is making a similar product is Green Eye Technology. They're out of Israel, but you see the camera. They're actually using Jetson Nano, which is an NVIDIA product in terms of the graphical processing unit. We talked about that a little bit earlier. This is Bilberry Technology. This is out of France. An American or a US-based company, Trimble Technology, has purchased Bilberry. But again, camera processor technologies for use in agriculture. Thought you might like this one. Everybody thinks of agriculture and they probably think of a farmer on a tractor. And I don't think there's any question about that. They probably think about that tractor being an internal combustion engine and more than likely being diesel, maybe biodiesel. This one will get you thinking. This is a sprayer. It is operated using solar cells. Those are 2 robotic arms. Artificial intelligence is identifying the weeds, and then they're using micro sprays just to apply herbicide to the weeds. Again, this technology is available today. The question is going to be deployment on U.S. farms, but it gets you a bit of a flavor for how things are changing. Solon Tech is a company out of Europe that has brought a very similar type AI spray application technology to the U.S. that is beginning to be deployed by major agricultural cooperatives. And so when you think about this technology, you know, your first reaction may be, well, can farmers afford it? Well, and that's a valid question. The reality of it is much of this technology may be delivered as farming as a service. We think about software as a service. In other words, we maybe use Word in the cloud, at software as a service. Well, this could be farming as a service. In other words, cooperatives, if you will, agricultural cooperatives, providing these type of technologies to farmers by bringing the machine to the field and amortizing the cost of that machine over increasingly larger numbers of acres, more farmers, if you will, but making it affordable to small farmers with small acreage. I was at Agritechnica a couple of weeks ago. Agritechnica is a large agricultural machinery show. It's held every 2 years in Germany. But the upshoot of this was I ran across about 35 different, I'll call them agricultural robots. You can call them autonomous tractors. Whatever you want, virtually every booth you went into, there was some example of this. This is Ag Exceed, which is a company that is partnered with several others. This was a tillage tool company down here, this blue autonomous tractor. They'd partner with Crony. This is a robotics company out of France now, and they had partnered with Rao is the name of this company, but this is a fertilizer applicator. This is a Kubota tractor out of Japan. This is fully autonomous. This is Roboti, which I believe is an Italian company. And then this was Kuhn, and the name of the robot here was Carl. But in all of these, with the exception of the Kubota tractor, one of the things you're going to notice is a lot of the facilities for humans have been removed from the machine. In other words, if there are humans in the loop still, they are probably monitoring this autonomous equipment in the field. I want to emphasize that there was kind of a sea change in terms of autonomous tractor offerings between Agritechnica in 2023 and when we go back to 2021, okay? Drones. A lot of people talk about drones. Farmers got pretty excited about drones. They got excited because they get remote sensed imagery of their farms, and they learned a lot about their farming practices. And drones were relatively inexpensive. I'll say the FAA probably lost control of the airspace with drones. We can have an extended conversation about that. But more recently, we've seen probably 25 or 30 drone companies spring up in the state of Ohio providing services to farmers. If you're, I've been following the regulatory landscape in terms of drones. There's about 3 or 4 things you have to do to be legal. One of those is you got to set for a Part 107 certification through the FAA. Everybody talks about that being the drone pilot's license. Well, that allows you to fly, but you got to be under 55 pounds. If you're over 55 pounds, you got to get a 333 exemption from the FAA. The other thing is when we start looking at handling agricultural chemicals and crop protectants, you have to get a pesticide applicator's license from the Ohio Department of Agriculture. And then you also have to get a Part 137 certification on the airframe from the FAA so your airframe can handle hazardous materials. And then on top of that, you're going to need a Part 137 certification. I got to be careful. There's Part 137 where you sit for the essentially aerial applicator's license. The other Part 137 is certification of the airframe, but you need those 5 things. But what we've seen happening is, in this case, this is a Helio Ag 272 drone, which has 18 gallons of spray mixture capacity. That drone tips the scale when fully loaded at close to 400 pounds. When you look at the rotors on that drone, and if you went across, if that drone was parked in the field, from rotor tip to rotor tip, side to side, it's probably 13 or 14 feet across, okay? And so these drones are getting very big. They're applying, these companies have been applying fungicides and things like soybeans and corn, 2 gallons of spray mixture per acre, charging $13 to $14 per acre for that drone to fly that field and apply that the fungicides. A lot of these people that started these drone companies have retired the entire capital cost of the drones in the first year. By the way, these are all electric, and so this is rapidly changing in agriculture. Talk a little bit about broadband connectivity. A graphic here showing all the devices that are connected to the internet. I continue to talk to companies like T-Mobile and Verizon about the fact that farmers need 5G connectivity in rural Ohio. And one of my concerns is going forward is we're going to have fields that are covered by broadband connectivity, and we're going to have fields that are not. It's going to start differentiating property values. But I've shown the sprayer here, and what I want to get people thinking about is the two-way data communications between the cloud and the sprayer. When the sprayer drives into the field in the future, you'll have to develop the intelligence for that machine on that day, for that hybrid or variety of crop, for that stage of growth, for the historical weather patterns up to that point in time, for the ground cover, the residue, if you will, whether it's a no-till farmer or a farmer that tills, for the soil type, and maybe even the soil texture and soil color. These are all going to be factors in making this technology work in agriculture, and we'll see some fantastic environmental dividends. We'll see some fantastic reductions in cost of production. AI is going to change the way we do agriculture. One of the things we've been looking at is at Ohio State University, we've become our own cell phone provider. Well, how do we do that? We've worked with a company, GXC, out of Texas, and we're now running a private 4G LTE, okay? Well, most of you have cell phones. You can appreciate 4G and especially the LTE capabilities. We have a lot of 5G in areas. Part of the problem with 5G is it's only going to be available in more populated areas. We're starting to think about the two-way data communications between the farm tractor and the cloud. And so one of the things that's going to inhibit the deployment of these technologies in agriculture is broadband connectivity in rural Ohio. Now, we know a lot of fiber is being plowed in, but I want to get you thinking about, we got to get between the end of the fiber and the tractor, okay? So certainly that's going to be some sort of wireless connection. We've installed this out at the Molly Cairn Agricultural Center, but this right here is a characteristic cell phone antenna, and this is a network access point. And so what we're doing is we have our own SIM cards now. We put them in our own cell phones, and we're connected to the internet at the Molly Cairn Agricultural Center. We connect our tractors, we connect robotic irrigation systems, we connect weather stations, we connect sensors in situ, sensors in the field, virtually anything that needs any kind of internet connectivity. We're starting to put health monitoring sensors on animals such as dairy cows and swine. We have robotic milkers that are connected to the internet. We have robotic feed carts. This is a rapidly expanding area in agriculture in terms of the connectivity. In the case of this network, we control who's on the network. We control who gets priority. We control upload and download rates. When you subscribe to Verizon, what they will do is optimize download rates at the cost of upload. In other words, everybody wants streaming video. You want to download your streaming video. In our case, we're going to need streaming video going back to the cloud so we can monitor the process of some of these tractors in the field. We can monitor animals and a number of other things. And so that communications in agriculture may not be optimal. This allows us to optimize that in terms of that two-way communications. There's something else that's very important in this, and that is latency in these signals. We need to have about 20 millisecond latency or less when we're connecting autonomous machines to the internet. That Kubota tractor I showed you, it has a Verizon connection. If you lose connectivity, the tractor stops. And so if you go down into a hole and you lose cell phone connectivity, you have to physically go out to the field, get on the tractor and drive out of the hole till you have connectivity to start it up again and allow it continuing to do its operations. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully there'll be time for some questions here. And I know there's a few in the chat.
Yeah, so much information. Thank you so much. There was one about, could we teach what the machine should, or what the field should look like to the machine, rather than what might be a foreign object. So that if it doesn't look like what we think it looks like, then again, though, that seems like that would be a difficult task as well.
And that's a great suggestion. I like that. The first thing is, if there's anything that occurs, the first reaction of the tractor is stop. Okay, don't do any damage. Okay. However, once the tractor stops, what's the next thing? Okay. And so when you're thinking about what's the next thing, okay, do we need to send somebody out to the field to see what the object is or see why the tractor stopped? Or can we begin to get the tractor intelligence to figure out what it is and decide whether or not it can go on? Okay. I'm going to use the example, and this is one that might make some sense to you. Right now, at harvest time, one of the concerns is always, especially when you have big combines, big agricultural harvesters, are there children playing in the fields? Okay. And the way we guard against them becoming entangled in the machines is we ensure the children are not playing in the field when we're harvesting. Okay. How do you ensure the neighbor's children are not in the field playing? Okay. And as these machines get bigger and wider, we may have to rely on something like artificial intelligence to help warn us or warn farm equipment operators of impending dangers. And then all of a sudden it becomes important to be able to identify what that object is in the field. And so again, starting out, I agree with you 100%. If we can identify there's a problem and stop the machine, that's most important. Okay. But after that, we also have to get past that and enable the machine to go on. And the question is, are we going to give the machine the intelligence it needs to make those decisions? Are we going to make certain that a human has to go to the field before that machine is allowed to go on? This is what a lot of people are struggling with. We talk about levels of autonomy. Right now in the automotive sector, we're probably a level 4 autonomy. In agriculture, we're probably level 3. In other words, level 3 autonomy, we still need a human in the loop. We get to level 5 is when you can take the human out of the loop and let the machine take care of everything as it moves through the field. And so we're kind of marching, we're on our way. But again, one of the things I want to remind everybody is agricultural settings vary widely, crops vary widely. The cultivation practices differ greatly. And so that is the challenge right now that we see as agricultural engineers in terms of deploying the technology. So long-winded answer, sorry for that, but hopefully that gives you some feel for what's going on.
And another question was about the amount of money that Kubota tractor and the AI cost. Are a lot of farmers able to afford that?
Yeah, one of the interesting things that's going on right now, there's going to be a base cost for that technology, no question about that. But most of these companies have gone to a subscription. The subscription is based on, it's an annual thing, but in the case of John Deere and See and Spray, farmers are paying per acre of use. Okay. So if you use the technology on a lot of acres, the cost per acre is the same as if you use it on fewer acres. And so that kind of favors a little bit the smaller farmer, and the big farmer doesn't have quite the advantage they might have had in the past by having big equipment and having access to some of the technology. So it begins to level the playing field. It's not perfect, but like I said, these companies are beginning to rethink their business models in terms of how technology gets deployed on farms.
Yeah, I think that kind of addresses that other question too about AI applications that are applicable in the smaller farms. But I also think co-ops have something to offer in that respect as well.
You know, how many garlic farmers are there in the United States? Anybody have any idea? There's 2 or 3 that amount to anything. And so they get pretty specialized because of what they're doing and because their operations are so concentrated. And so in a lot of cases, they're going to pick up the cost of that artificial intelligence. It's going to be cost effective to do so because of the size of their operations. Corn and soybean farmers are a lot more plentiful. Okay. And so, you know, you can find corn and soybean farmers in many of the states here in the US. And so companies like John Deere are going to make certain that they make that technology is affordable, but they're going to do it by spreading it over a lot of acres. So,
right. Well, I hate to end us but I think we have to honor everybody's time. Thank you again for being here. We just want to remind you to visit GrowNextGen.org. We are always looking for computer science and technology and engineering types of pieces of curriculum. So if you have some really good things that you're using in your classroom, we'd love to hear about it, and we'd love to post it on GrowNextGen. So just keep that in mind. And next week, we will be seeing an example of a lab at Ohio State University, and they will be showing us around this Trimble lab that is a sponsored lab, and it's teaching students in these types of technologies. How might they work together? How might they get into a career pathway along this in this area and understand more about developing the AI and the software and the things that agriculture is going to need as we move into the future. So please mark that on your calendar. There's a QR code there. You can register as well. And last but not least, again, one more time, thank you, Dr. Shearer, for your expertise and for sharing it with us today. And we did put your email up there, but if you also have other questions, you can certainly reach out to me at jane@educationprojects.org, and I'd be happy to connect you or try and get you the information that you need. So again, we appreciate everybody's time, and we will, I see a few new messages, so I'm not sure whether those are all thank yous and goodbyes, but we really do appreciate everybody being here today.
Thanks for your time again.
Thanks so much. Nice messages in the chat.
Well, Jane, let me know if you need anything else.
Well, I truly appreciate your time and all of your expertise. It's so interesting to listen to you every single time.